I was a God hater. The state labeled me properly. I remember I used to be offended when I made it to prison by the time I was 18. In prison, I used to save my life, but they labeled me a threat to society at 18 years old, and they were trying to ban me from Hillsborough County, but rightfully so, because when my mom got murdered, they tried to put me in foster care and I ran, so I was 14, 15 years old on the street. And I started to just have a place to stay. I literally was selling myself. I was sleeping with older women so I have a roof over my head, and the older women would cook for me so I didn't have to worry about food. But I also started robbing to make sure I could provide for myself, plus I had a child. In turn, I was robbing so much, a little stick-up kid, an older drug dealer, slowed me down and taught me how to sell drugs to prevent me from robbing so much. And the weird thing about that in the neighborhood, he felt like he was doing me a better deed because I lived longer selling drugs than I would by robbing people, because it was known that I was a shooter. So, man, I was a wicked young dude. I was godless, and I was heartless, and a lot of things it was all emotions. But like I say, at 18, when I was in prison, I found myself in prison at 18. I wasn't an angel. I was innocent of the charges I went to prison for, but I wasn't innocent. The cops did what was necessary to get me off the streets. They planted some drugs on me. I was wanted for worse. I was wanted for worse, and I've done worse. But while I was in prison, I made sure that when I was headed to prison, I didn't want jailhouse religion. I didn't want to know nothing about God. As a matter of fact, for years I hadn't been being mentored and molded by members of the Black Panther Party, members of the Nation of Islam, Hebrew Israelites. So you gotta realize that with all the knowledge I was encountering and what the idea of God was from this school of thought, I still knew it wasn't per se the God of the universe, this God of love, because I hated him. But everything else that I did had a appearance of righteousness and intelligence, but it wasn't related to holiness, so I knew that it wasn't the same. Needless to say, in prison, I started encountering, I was sneaking in. I was trying to destroy the Bible. I was trying to prove that the Bible was a book of falsehood and that Christianity was a white man's religion. So as I tried to dissect it, I ran into contradictions that caused me to realize that a lot that I was taught to battle Christians with was actually lies. I found the Christian church was established in Ethiopia since AD 4. The history, I went to running into stuff that says, hold on, there's something more valid about this book and this religion than what I was taught. So I end up reading, I'm gonna skip a lot, but I end up reading the story of Gideon in the Bible. I'm sitting in prison, I'm sitting on a bunk, is what was the bunk beds. And there were window panes. I seen that Gideon questioned God to find out his identity and purpose. And now I'm like, well, if this is so much of this going on and it's a real God, because I start feeling different as I'm reading this book, the book changing me. As I'm reading the book, I'm actually changing, and I'm not even trying to adapt to this book. And I say, if it's a God for real, I put a test before God. There were window panes, and I test God in a weird way, like a child would. I'm like, if God is real, send a bird by to touch this window pane. It's raining outside, we're sitting on Strict the Movement. And when I called out a square for God to send a bird by, amazingly a bird touched that square. But I'm an intellectual and this don't make sense. That was just coincidental. So needless to say, I chose numerous other squares for the next hour and a half. And every square I chose, telling God to prove yourself to me. I'm realizing that the God I've been hating is a God that's real. And everything I've been doing is in violation of this God. So he's played tic-tac-toe with me to prove that you are God. You have a purpose for my life, and I've been in error.